We'll discuss the situation at the front next. Joining us now is Denys Popovych, a military analyst. Denys, welcome to the Freedom TV channel. Glory to Ukraine.
Hello.
Glory to the heroes.
Denys, I'd like to start our conversation with your take on what you think about this truce that we're supposed to see until the end of April 12th. Yes, it's clear that the Russian side, the dictator Putin himself, is presenting it as if the government, the Kremlin, decided it. Although we know that earlier, long before this, as they say, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made a similar proposal. What do you think we'll see during this short period of time?
To be honest, I didn't believe the truce would happen, I'll be frank. Well, because the Russian army was trying to advance, and we saw the bombings of Ukrainian cities, including those that continued into the daylight hours. They were carried out in broad daylight. But the truce, as we see, has been confirmed. As I understand it, Volodymyr Zelensky also confirmed it, stating that Russia has a chance not to resume strikes after this truce ends. Well, of course, a truce is a good thing. That means no casualties, no strikes on Ukrainian cities, especially on the eve of the holiday. So certainly the fact that a truce was reached even for such a short period of time is, of course, very positive. But I'd like to recall the situation from a year ago, when there was also an Easter truce. And then the enemy used it to advance, to occupy gray zones, to take those areas, and then start moving forward in the Donbas, in the Donetsk region. And the situation we're seeing now near Pokrovsky and Mirnohrad is a result of the enemy advancing back then under the cover of the Easter truce. So in my view, three things are important here. First, how well it will be observed during those 32 or 36 hours it's declared for. Second, what are its terms? Won't the enemy use again the truce, that is, to advance under its cover and then launch an offensive from more advantageous positions? We see now that their offensive is failing. The Russian army is taking losses. Their progress is minimal, but they might fix the situation through the truce. And third, of course, is whether hostilities will actually resume after it ends. Because as Volodymyr Zelensky said, Russia has a chance not to continue the fighting.
Denys, a quick clarification. Well, we're just using the word truce as it appears. Yes, in the statements and words of either side or their respective representatives. But essentially, we're talking about a certain ceasefire regime, right? And do drones flying in there count or not exactly? Or do we just have too little data right now to tell us for sure that, yes, this is actually working?
Well, I have the same questions, and of course, there's little information. We know a truce was proposed, announced, and accepted. The terms for observing this truce are unknown to us. That's why I'm saying these conditions are extremely important. Now, you mentioned drones, meaning strikes on Ukrainian territory specifically. But obviously, if these strikes don't happen during this period, then we should also respond in kind, meaning we shouldn't strike the territory of the Russian Federation either. And if there's a ceasefire right for this period, then the question arises, what about Russian troop movements in the gray zones? Is that an unfriendly act? Is it a violation of the truce or not? So many questions are arising, and unfortunately, we don't have more detailed information yet about what this truce will actually entail.
Regarding the situation at the front, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, Syrskyi, noted particularly high activity of Russian troops in the Pokrovsk direction. He also noted that Ukraine is maintaining the strategic initiative and preventing Russia from resuming a large-scale offensive. According to Alexander Syrskyi, one of the key factors of our Ukrainian advantage is the unmanned forces. For 4 months straight, unmanned systems units have been neutralizing more enemy personnel than they can recruit into their ranks. And at the same time, Syrskyi noted that the enemy isn't standing still either. As of early April, the occupiers expanded their unmanned systems forces to 101,000 troops, and by the end of this year, they plan to increase them to 165,500. Well, that figure looks colossal. How do you assess the overall situation regarding this full-scale offensive that's being stretched out like chewing gum? Both the frontline situation and the increase in Russia's unmanned forces, where will they get the resources?
We're currently hearing reports about troop transfers to the southern sector of the front, enemy troops, so they're clearly preparing to go on the offensive. I assume it'll be after Easter once this truce is over. The question of whether they'll take the chance to stop the fire for a long period remains open, but so far it doesn't look like they'll take it, as they're moving troops. So we have to anticipate that the enemy will try to roll out their offensive in the south. And we see that the enemy isn't leaving Donbas alone. The goal has been set to capture Donbas completely, and they're trying to move in that direction, as evidenced by the high number of clashes in the Pokrovsk sector of the front, as mentioned. This includes the battles for Hraishain and the enemy's attempt in this context to break through to Dobropilia. This includes the fighting near Kostiantinivka. And this is, of course, the offensive toward the Kramatorsk agglomeration. So that's the situation on the front, to describe it in general terms. Regarding the drone systems of the Russian Federation, well, their move is clear. They see the effect of our drone forces and they want to replicate it. It's a sign of the times, meaning drones are now shaping the battlefield, and of course they must be classified separately as a separate branch or type of force, as the Russian Federation is planning to do. And they are trying to do the same thing. One of the resources, the visible resources for replenishing these forces, is university students. Usually those who show poor academic performance or have academic debt, and they are strongly urged to join the drone forces under the threat of expulsion. So these processes are happening in Russia now, and there are certain quotas which are sent down to universities from the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, quotas of students to be recruited into the Russian armed forces. And there is a very active propaganda campaign underway, covering over 100 educational institutions of various types, either higher education or vocational schools. So more than 100 educational institutions in the Russian Federation across various regions are now covered by this propaganda.
And let's talk, about a certain connection. I'd like to focus on this with you, given Ukraine's long-range strikes on what are legitimate targets for us on the territory of the Russian Federation. So Western partners have asked Ukraine to stop the strikes on Russian oil terminals. However, Kiev continues to act in its own national interests. This was stated by the head of the main intelligence directorate, Kirilo Budanov. According to him, the main reason for the partners' concern is the issue of global energy pricing. Let's hear this position and then continue our conversation.
I can only say in general terms, yes, this exists. Why is this happening? You can also understand. It's a matter of pricing. No, we have our own war. They can be understood, that's their truth. But there is also our truth and our national interest, and it is exactly what it is. We are not stopping. Kirilo Budanov, head of the main intelligence directorate, during a briefing at the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities.
And if, slightly returning to the question of this temporary ceasefire until the end of April 12th, accordingly, I'd like to ask you, tell me, is it possible that this is connected to that position of agreement or a certain nod from Putin on this issue? And tell me, is there a certain correlation, and can we link certain things happening on different parts of the front with what Ukraine is doing, essentially taking out various objects of both military and oil infrastructure of the Russian Federation?
The effect of us taking out oil infrastructure facilities is quite medium term. It won't be instantaneous. Why? Because after all, there are certain fuel reserves at Russia's disposal. And these, reserves, they help, let's say, they're a kind of safety cushion. I mean, it's one thing if we knock out one refinery and another thing if we knock out, say, several. Now, if we knock out several refineries, several large refineries stop producing fuel, well, then after some time, of course, there could be an effect. The same strikes we're currently conducting against, the Russian Federation's oil industry. They're mainly export-oriented. That is, we're trying to disrupt Russia's ability to, export its energy resources, that is, to earn money, especially against the backdrop of rising oil prices. So to prevent Russia from getting extra income from rising oil prices, we're trying to make it so they can't sell that oil. And we're hitting those terminals, both in Ust-Luga and in Novorossiysk. Just recently, a pumping station was hit that provided the oil supply to that Novorossiysk terminal. So we're currently fighting specifically against Russian oil supplies abroad, thereby reducing its budgetary capabilities. Therefore, as for a direct correlation, I see a major impact from our strikes on defense industry facilities. There's a major complaint from Z-War correspondents who repeatedly post on their Telegram channels, the ones still active, that there's a shortage of anti-aircraft missiles and systems. And because of that, they fail to shoot down these drones in time as they fly to destroy these facilities, refineries, terminals, and military industrial complex facilities of the Russian Federation and so on.
Denys, thank you very much. Well, yeah, let them howl while they still can. Yeah, while they can. Thank you for the conversation. We appreciate you joining our broadcast. I'll remind you that we were joined by Denys Popovych, a military observer,